Jack Grealish played 90 minutes for Manchester City in their victory against Plymouth Argyle. Good to see him. We haven't seen that much of Jack Grealish this season. There's been question marks over his career, quite frankly, at the moment. So, Luke Moore, we are talking about this today. How does Jack Grealish get his career back on track?
What a question. What a question for us to answer. How do we get our careers back on track, Marcus, first and foremost?
This is an attempt.
Okay, right. One last crack at the big time.
Absolutely.
We'll see how it goes. I find Jack Grealish an endlessly interesting player. And this question is a good one because the first place my mind leaps to when you start thinking about Jack Grealish and you start looking at the contributions he's made, the things he's won, the way he plays, is Jack Grealish is a player that goes on vibes more than stats. Now, these days, lots of people like to think about the numbers. They like to put goals, assists, all the rest of it. And of course, the trophies that you win. But I think Grealish's contributions are much better summed up in things like fouls drawn and movement and one or two other bits and pieces.
You don't have stats on dragging defenders out of position.
Exactly.
And all that
And that's why it's absolutely vital when you're talking about football, watching football, and you have an interest in it and want to contribute content around it, you have to be able to splice statistics and the eye test as well. That's really important. You've got to sit right in the middle. With Jack Grealish, there's no better player to do that with, I don't think. It's clear to me, and as it should be clear to many people, that he is now on a downward trajectory in the current place he's in.
Yeah, and he's not far off 30 as well.
He'll be 30 soon.
Yeah.
He's not getting near the Man City team for important games. Now, it becomes a bit of a fog of war scenario, though, because of how inconsistent and how difficult it's been at Man City. The charges hanging over their head. You've been on record to say that Guardiola's really not going to get it, whatever it is, back at Man City long term. So we've got to look at it through that lens as well. But I think it's obvious now that, some of the things that Guardiola said about him kind of consistently, really, most recently when talking about Savinho playing ahead of him, who's 20 years old and is regularly being picked ahead of him. Guardiola said something along the lines of Jack needs to be 100% at it every training session, every game, as an answer as to why Grealish isn't playing.
We need Jack back is kind of what he's been saying.
Quite. If we're talking about Jack being back, though, and I'm thinking of Jack Nicholson now. Saying that. What's obvious, though, is that he's not... I'm trying to phrase this in a way without coming across as harsh, because he's had a great career and he's a great player to watch, and I'm a fan of his. His peak has not been massively high, and it's not been very long either. He's almost a player who... we know what he's capable of, but we don't see it that often. And that is borne out by statistics. If you look at the great season he had in 22-23 when City win everything, he actually has a great second half to the season. Yeah. And even then, and it was good, and it can't be summed up entirely by stats, as we know.
It's summed up in a picture on the back of a bus.
It can be very much. That's what we're talking about, vibes, exactly. But even then, if you look at the top 20 ever contributions to goals in a Premier League season, I mean, he's nowhere near it. I mean, his numbers even that season are not notable numbers. But
he was a mainstay in the team.
Important part of the team, and there's other reasons.
It's not easy if you're a Pep Guardiola player.
I'm not denigrating his contribution. I'm saying statistically, though, it becomes important because what I'm going to go on to say, and I'll give you a quick spoiler now, is he needs a move. Right? He needs to move somewhere. Right. And there's difficulties around the move. And the reasons for that are that, A, he costs a lot of money, has 2.5 years left in his deal at a huge salary, and so there's not an obvious landing spot for him. Even if you go back to Villa, where he's a legend, they've moved on. He's not getting the Villa team, not based on what we've seen. And his statistics make it difficult for a recruitment director or a manager to say to an owner, if we get Grealish, we will get this in return. Because they're going to say, well, hang on a minute, you're not going to get that. We don't know what you're going to get. So that's a brief summary of my thoughts. The question was, how do he get his career back on track? There's an argument to be made, I think, that he waits and sees what happens at City in the summer. If Guardiola moves on in the summer, obviously all bets are off. We don't know what's going to happen. If the charges and the punishment, the charges lead to a severe punishment, again, who knows? I mean, who knows what's going to happen? So there's a lot of unknowns there. But the standard issue answer, I think, would be at this point, based on what we've seen, if all things were equal, he needs to find a move. Yeah. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people will have opinions on this, of course. Do remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because we bloody love that. I mean, he's been unlucky with injuries. We have to say that.
Fair saying that, yeah. But is it unlucky, though?
Well, I think it is. I mean,
some injuries are unlucky.
Well, you said a moment ago that he's not been picked for the big games. But when he got his chance against Real Madrid, for example, he put in a more encouraging display and then has to go off with an injury.
Yeah.
So I think he has been a bit unlucky with injuries. But what Guardiola's been saying is in training and so on, his focus is maybe not there. And after that stunning season when they win the treble and, he's, hang it in the Louvre.
Am I being harsh by talking about the second half of the season?
No, I don't think. But whatever it is, the fact is he was a part of that team. And made his contribution for a stunning season, the best season, obviously in Man City's history, and one of the best seasons in any English club's history.
Sure.
So he's got that. How do you then kick on from that? Injuries aside, because again, anyone can get an injury and anyone can be unlucky there. And I think that's the chat with Grealish, is a bit of inertia seemed to have kicked in with Grealish, and it probably cost him a place in the World Cup, the Euro 2024.
Yeah, for sure it did. Yeah.
And he said it was such a huge disappointment. He was then, so I'm bringing England into the conversation now. He was brought back into the England fold by Lee Carsley, partly due to injuries and so on, but he took his chance. He scored against Ireland, his boyhood team, and he scored against Ireland, and it was more encouraging. In fact, what was nice about that was to see him in a more kind of central role, which, let's be realistic, for England he's not going to get, but it was still nice to see him in there. And it felt a bit like the Grealish of old. And I think that when you see Grealish playing like this for Man City, and it's not that convincing, and he seems to just be used in the cups and sparingly when he is fit, people think, come on, we love this guy. I think there's a real deep love for Grealish because of who he is and his personality and the vibes, but also the playing style, and we remember him at Villa.
That's exactly right, but that's exactly, you got to the exact nub of the issue that I was trying to say earlier. People like him.
Yep.
He reminds you of a kind of more free spirit, less systemic type player that we see a lot more of.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to disassociate those feelings and that kind of emotional response to him to what he's actually bringing.
Yeah.
This guy really, across his career, inclusive of Villa in the Championship for a bit, is a 1 in 8 goal scorer for a forward player. Maybe you'd have your own opinions on that because you say, look, he's not a striker, he's not out there to get goals. Lots of players in that position score a lot of goals, right? And his assists numbers do not trouble the most serious assist makers in the Premier League ever,
but
really.
But he's an exciting player, and what he brings, I mean, a number of the senior England players said to Gareth Southgate when Grealish was left out of the Euro 2024 squad, they took him aside. Reports said Harry Kane was one of them, and said, "Are you sure about that?"
Yeah.
And you're talking about senior players
because of vibes, though.
Well, because but maybe, but that counts.
And because
for something.
he'll draw a foul for you later on.
Well, all that kind of stuff. But it was, him and Haaland were mainstays in the Man City side when they won the treble. I understand that Grealish wouldn't be like the core of that side. Sort of Rodri and Diaz and Haaland and probably Edison as well, but. People like playing with the guy and they like having him around. And it's not just, he's a bit of a laugh. They like having him on the pitch. And at the moment, that's not happening. And it's a great shame because we know that this guy is a very, very enjoyable player to watch. And how does he get back to that? With Man City, it took him a while to adapt to the system of Guardiola. That's fair. They bought him for 100 million, so they were going to wait. But when he got it, he got it. Now Guardiola. His time at Man City is if he doesn't leave in the summer, which people don't think he will, they think he'll honour his contract. He'll probably be gone in roughly about 18 months' time or 16 months' time. So there'll be a new manager. Does Jack Grealish need a new manager at Man City? Or does he need a new club?
Well,
and that's the question, because with the system-based approach, I think people are thinking, okay, Grealish now is very predictable the way he plays. That freedom that you talked about, and I understand if you go back to Villa, it's a number of years ago now, and he's won the Champions League, and so he's a different type of player, has a different type of status. But every time Grealish gets the ball, he seems to check back on his right and then play it simple. And that's okay if you want to recycle possession and you're playing on a certain side. But my feeling is that he had his heyday will be that treble-winning season under Guardiola. Will he be a big part of a new manager coming in, whenever that may be? Will he be a big part of Guardiola trying to get Man City back to winning ways next season? I'm not sure. So as a neutral, I sort of think I'd like him to go to a club where actually we can see a bit of the Grealish of old.
We're talking ourselves into a position where we say he needs to play in a team where they can almost... that old cliche of build a team around him and make him the main man, which basically he was at Villa, and perhaps...
Or allow him a bit more creative attacking flair.
Sure, but you wonder whether at the cutting edge of competitive top-level football, if there's room for that. There's room for that for players these days who carve it out themselves, who are also bringing loads of other stuff to the team, and can earn their right to get that. I mean, he's at the very, very top. Despite Man City's troubles, he's playing for the greatest manager to argue ever played the game. So it's difficult to manage the game. So it's difficult to go anywhere other than slightly down for where he goes next. Sure. But the harsh answer might just be that you give Guardiola another 16 months. Maybe he's only got another few months. Maybe he moves on in the summer, regardless of the contract. In which case, it probably won't be up to Jack Grealish, because a new manager that comes in is going to go one of two ways and much more likely to want to move him on. The question was, how does he get his career back on track? To get his career back on track, he has to play. And he's not going to play at the moment. Yeah. And Guardiola's given the reasons why. So it may well be that this is a player who's incredibly talented, has amazing personality. We loved watching him. We love what he's all about. But his top-level contributions were fleeting. And you know what? When he could do it, and when he did get it, and when it was good, it doesn't get much better. It was a treble. It was a Champions League. 99.9% of football players who play the game professionally can't say that. So it's not a criticism of him. It's just that maybe he's a lens through which we can fully understand exactly what it takes to consistently perform at the highest level, and freedom from injuries by taking your training and taking your profession seriously, or more seriously than he did, are a part of that. And if he's fallen short on that, he's fallen short on that. But he's given us some great memories. It has to be a move to possibly abroad, possibly to a lower Premier League side. But
my worry would be that
the wages are a problem.
Is that you go out of that Man City environment, and
it could be the best thing for him.
It could be the best thing for him, but you'd worry that once you're in that incredibly competitive and elite level environment, when you go outside of that, it's maybe some players find it difficult to get motivated, and I would be concerned. But that's why I think if he played for a manager who loved him, got him, want that Grealish back again, I think that could be it. I think playing for Aston Villa would motivate him, but as you say, maybe Villa have moved on. I don't know.
In my view, he finds himself in the same position he's in now. Doesn't get in the team.